He heard his door open softly, then close. He knew at once that it was his battle instructions. He opened his eyes, expecting to find the darkness of early morning, before 0600. Instead, the lights were on. He was naked, and when he moved, the bed was soaking wet. His eyes were puffy and painful from crying. He looked at the clock on his desk. 1820, it said. It's the same day. I already had a battle today. I had 2 battles today. The bastards know what I've been through, and they're doing this to me. William B. Griffin Army. Talomomo, Tiger Army, 1900. He sat on the edge of the bed. The note trembled in his hand. I can't do this, he said silently, and then not silently. I can't do this. He got up, bleary, and looked for his flash suit. Then he remembered. He had put it in the cleaner while he showered. It was still there. Holding the paper, he walked out of his room. Dinner was nearly over, but there were a few people in the corridor. But no one spoke to him, just watched him, perhaps in awe of what had happened at noon in the bathroom, perhaps because of the forbidding, terrible look on his face. Most of his boys were in the barracks. Ho, Ender, they're going to be practiced tonight. Ender handed the paper to Hot Soup. Those sons of bitches, he said. 2 at once? 2 armies, shouted Crazy Tom. They'll just trip over each other, said Bean. I've got to clean up, Ender said. Get them ready. Get everybody together. I'll meet you there at the gate. He walked out of the barracks. A tumult of conversation rose behind them. He heard Crazy Tom scream, 2 fart-eating armies, we'll whip their butts. The bathroom was empty, all cleaned up. None of the blood that poured from Bonzo's nose in the shower water. All gone. Nothing bad ever happened here. Ender stepped under the water and rinsed himself off, took the sweat of combat and let it run down the drain. All gone, except they recycled it, and will be drinking Bonzo's blood water in the morning. All the life gone out of it, but his blood just the same. His blood and my sweat, washed down in their stupidity or cruelty, or whatever it was that made them let it happen. He dried himself, dressed in his flash suit, and walked to the battle room. His army was waiting in the corridor, the door still not opened. They watched him in silence as he walked to the front to stand by the blank gray force field. Of course, they all knew about his fight in the bathroom today. That and their own weariness from the battle that morning kept them quiet, while the knowledge that they would be facing 2 armies filled them with dread. Everything they can do to beat me, thought Ender. Everything they can think of. Change all the rules. They don't care, just so they beat me. Well, I'm sick of the game. No game is worth Bonzo's blood pinking the water on the bathroom floor. Ice me. Send me home. I don't want to play anymore. The door disappeared. Only 3 meters out there were 4 stars together, completely blocking the view from the door. 2 armies weren't enough. They had to make Ender deploy his forces blind. Bean, said Ender, take your boys and tell me what's on the other side of this star. Bean pulled the coil of twine from his waist, tied one end around him, and handed the other end to a boy in his squad, and stepped gently through the door. His squad quickly followed. He had practiced this several times, and it took only a moment before they were braced on the star. Holding the end of the twine, Bean pushed off at a great speed in a line almost parallel to the door. When he reached the corner of the room, he pushed off again and rocketed straight out toward the enemy. The spots of light on the wall showed that the enemy was shooting at him. The rope was stopped by each edge of the star in turn. His arc became tighter, his direction changed, and he became an impossible target to hit. His squad caught him neatly as he came around the star from the other side. He moved all his arms and legs so those waiting inside the door wouldn't know that the enemy hadn't flashed him anywhere. Ender dropped through the gate. It's really dim, said Bean, but light enough you can't follow people easily by the lights on their suits. Worst possible for seeing. It's all open space from this star to the enemy side of the room. They've got 8 stars making a square around their door. I didn't see anybody except the ones peeking around the boxes. They're just sitting there waiting for us. As if to corroborate Bean's statement, the enemy began to call out to them, Hey, we be hungry. Come and feed us. Your ass is dragon. Your ass is dragon. Ender's mind felt dead. This was stupid. He didn't have a chance, outnumbered but 2 to 1 and forced to attack a protected enemy. In a real war, any commander with brains would all retreat and save this army. What the hell, said Bean. It's only a game. It stopped being a game when they threw away the rules. So you throw 'em away too? Ender grinned. Okay, why not? Let's see how they react to a formation. Bean was appalled. A formation? We've never done a formation in the whole time we've been an army. We've still got a month before our training period is normally supposed to end. About time we start doing formations. Always have to know formations. He formed an A with his fingers and showed it to the blank door and beckoned. A tune quickly emerged and Ender began arranging them behind the star. 3 meters wasn't enough room to work in. The boys were frightened and confused, and it took nearly 5 minutes just to get them to understand what they were doing. Tiger and Griffin soldiers were reduced to chanting catcalls, while their commanders argued about whether to try to use their overwhelming force to attack Dragon Army while they were still behind the star. Momo was all for attacking. We outnumber him 2 to 1, while B said, sit tight and we can't lose. Move out and he can figure out a way to beat us. So as they sat tight until finally in the dusky light they saw a large mass slip out from behind Ender's star. It held its shape, even when abruptly stopping, moving sideways, and launching itself toward the dead center of the 8 stars, where 82 soldiers waited. Dooby-doo, said a griffin. They're doing a formation. They must have been putting that together for all of 5 minutes, said Momo. If we'd attacked them while they were doing it, we could have destroyed them. Eat it, Momo, whispered Bee. You saw the way the little kid flew. He went all the way around the star and back behind without ever touching a wall. Maybe they've all got hooks. Did you think of that? They've got something new there. The formation was a strange one. A square formation of tightly packed bodies in front making a wall. Behind it, a cylinder, 6 boys in circumference and 2 boys deep, their limbs outstretched and frozen so they couldn't possibly be holding on to each other. Yet they held together as tightly as if they had been tied, which, in fact, they were. From inside the formation, Dragon Army was firing with deadly accuracy, forcing griffins and tigers to stay tightly packed on their stars. The back of that sucker is open, said Bee. As soon as they get between the stars, we can get around behind. Don't talk about it, do it, said Momo. Then he took his own advice and ordered his boys to launch against the wall and rebound out behind the dragon formation. In the chaos of their takeoff, while Griffin Army held both the cylinder and the front wall split in 2, as boys inside it pushed off. Almost at once, the formation also reversed direction, heading back toward the Dragon Gate. Most of the griffins fired in the formations, as the boys moving backward with them. The tigers took survivors of Dragon Army from behind. But there was something wrong. William B. thought for a moment and realized what it was. Those formations couldn't have reversed direction in mid-flight unless someone pushed off in the opposite direction. And if they took off with enough force to make a 20-man formation move backwards, they must be going fast. There they were, 6 small dragon soldiers down near William B.'s own door. From the number of lights showing on their flash suits, B could see that only 3 of them were disabled and 2 of them damaged. Only 1 was whole. Nothing to be frightened of. B casually aimed at them, pressed the button, and nothing happened. The lights went on. The game was over. Even though he was looking right at them, it took B a moment to realize what had just happened. 4 of the dragon soldiers had their helmets pressed to the corners of the door, and 1 of them had just passed through. They had just carried out the victory ritual. They were getting destroyed. They had hardly inflicted any casualties, and they had the gall to perform the victory and end the game right under their noses. Only then did it occur to William that not only had Dragon Army ended the game, it was possible that under the rules they had won it. After all, no matter what happened, you were not certified as the winner unless you had enough unfrozen soldiers to touch the corners of the gate and pass someone through the enemy's corridor. Therefore, by one way of thinking, you could argue that the ending ritual was victory. The battle room certainly recognized it as the end of the game. The teacher gate opened and Major Anderson came into the room. Ender, he called, looking around. One of the frozen dragon soldiers tried to answer him through jaws that were clamped shut by the flash suit. Anderson hooked over to him and thawed him. Ender was smiling. I beat you again, sir, he said. Nonsense, Anderson said softly. Your battle was with Griffin and Tiger. How stupid do you think I am? Said Ender. Loudly, Anderson said, after that little maneuver, the rules are being revised to require that all the enemy's soldiers must be frozen or disabled before the gate can be reversed. It could only work once anyway, Ender said. Anderson handed him the hook. Ender unfroze everything at once. To hell with protocol. To hell with everything. Hey, Anderson shouted as he moved away. What is it next time? My army in a cage without guns? With the rest of the battle school against them? How about a little equality? There was a loud murmur of agreement from the other boys, and not all of them came from Dragon Army. Anderson did not so much as turn around to acknowledge Ender's challenge. Finally, it was William B. who answered. Ender, if you're on one side of the battle, it won't be equal no matter what the conditions are. Right, called the boys. Many of them laughed. Tallomomo began clapping his hands. Ender Wiggin, he shouted. The other boys also clapped and shouted Ender's name. Ender passed through the enemy gate. His soldiers followed him. The sound of them shouting his name followed him through the corridors. Practice tonight? Asked Crazy Tom. Ender shook his head. Tomorrow morning, then. No. Well, when? Never again, as far as I'm concerned. He could hear the murmurs behind him. Hey, that's not fair, said one of the boys. It's not our fault the teachers are screwing up the game. You can't just stop teaching us stuff because... Ender slammed his open hand against the wall and shouted at the boy. I don't care about the game anymore. His voice echoed through the corridor. Boys from the other armies came to their doors. He spoke quietly into the silence. Do you understand that? And he whispered, the game is over. He walked back to his room alone. He wanted to lie down, but he couldn't because his bed was wet. It reminded him of all that had happened today, and in fury he tore the mattress and the blankets from the bed frame and shoved them out into the corridor. Then he wadded up a uniform to serve as a pillow and lay on the fabric of the wires strung across the frame. It was uncomfortable, but Ender didn't care enough to get up. He had only been there a few minutes when someone knocked on the door. Go away, he said softly. Whoever was knocking didn't hear him or didn't care. Finally, Ender said to come in. It was Bean. Go away, Bean. Bean nodded but didn't leave. Instead, he looked at his shoes. Ender almost yelled at him, cursed at him, screamed at him to leave. Instead, he noticed how very tired Bean looked, his whole body bent with weariness, his eyes dark from lack of sleep, and yet his skin was still soft and translucent, the skin of a child, the soft curved cheek, the slender limbs of a little boy. He wasn't 8 years old yet. It didn't matter. He was brilliant and dedicated and good. He was a child. He was young. No, he isn't, thought Ender. Small, yes, but Bean has been through a battle with a whole army depending on him, and the soldiers that he led, and he performed splendidly, and they won. And there's no youth in that, no childhood. Taking Ender's silence and softening an expression as permission to stay, Bean took another step into the room. Only then did Ender see a small slip of paper in his hand. You're transferred? Asked Ender. It was incredulous, but his voice came out sounding uninterested. Dead. To Rabbit Army. Ender nodded. Of course. It was obvious. If I can't be defeated with my army, they'll take my army away. Karn Karby's a good man, said Ender. I hope he recognizes what you're worth. Karn Karby was graduated today. He got his notice while we were fighting our battle. Well, who's commanding Rabbit then? Bean held his hands out helplessly. Me. Ender looked at the ceiling and nodded. Of course. After all, you're only 4 years younger than the regular age. It isn't funny. I don't know what's going on here. All the changes in the game and now this. I wasn't the only one transferred, you know. They graduated half the commanders and transferred a lot of our guys to command their armies. Which guys? It looks like every toon leader and every assistant. Of course, if they decide to wreck my army, they'll cut it to the ground. Whatever they're doing, they're thorough. You'll still win, Ender. We all know that. Crazy Tom, he said, you mean I'm supposed to figure out how to beat Dragon Army? Everybody knows you're the best. They can't break you down no matter what they already have. No, Ender, they can't. I don't care about the game anymore, Bean. I'm not going to play it anymore. No more practices, no more battles. They can put their little slips of paper on the floor all they want, but I won't go. I decided that before I went through the door today. That's why I had you go for the gate. I didn't think it would work, but I didn't care. I just wanted to go out in style. You should have seen William B.'s face. He just stood there trying to figure out how he had lost when you only had 7 boys who could wiggle their toes, and he only had 3 who couldn't. Why should I want to see William B.'s face? Why should I want to beat anybody? Ender pressed his palms against his eyes. I hurt Bonzo really bad today, Bean. I really hurt him bad. He had it coming. I knocked him out standing up. It was like he was dead, standing there, and I kept hurting him. Bean said nothing. I just wanted to make sure he never hurt me again. He won't, said Bean. They sent him home. Already? The teachers didn't say much. They never do. The official notice says he was graduated, but they put the assignment, tactical school, support, pre-command, navigation, that kind of thing. It just said Cartagena, Spain. That's his home. I'm glad they graduated him. Hell, Ender, we're just glad he's gone. If we'd known what he was going to do to you, we would have killed him on the spot. Was it true he had a whole bunch of guys gang up on you? No, it was just him and me. He fought with honor. If it weren't for his honor, he and the others would have beaten me together. They might have killed me then. His sense of honor saved my life. I didn't fight with honor, Ender added. I fought to win. Bean laughed. And you did. Kicked him right out of orbit. A knock on the door. Before Ender could answer, the door opened. Ender had been expecting more of his soldiers. Instead, it was Major Anderson, and behind him came Colonel Graff. Ender Wiggin, said Graff. Ender got to his feet. Yes, sir. Your display of temper in the battle room today was insubordinate, and it is not to be repeated. Yes, sir, said Ender. Bean was feeling insubordinate, and he didn't think Ender deserved the rebuke. I think it was about time somebody told a teacher how we felt about what you've been doing. The adults ignored him. Anderson handed Ender a sheet of paper, a full-sized sheet, not one of the little slips of paper that serve for internal orders within the battle school. It was a full-fledged set of orders. Bean knew what it meant. Ender was being transferred out of the school. Graduated? Asked Bean. Ender nodded. What took them so long? You're only 2 or 3 years early. You've already learned how to walk and talk and dress yourself. What will they have left to teach you? Ender shook his head. All I know is the game's over. He folded up the paper. None too soon. Can I tell my army? There isn't time, said Graff. Your shuttle leaves in 20 minutes. Besides, it's better not to talk to them after you get your orders. It makes it easier. For them or for you? Ender asked. He didn't wait for an answer. He turned quickly to Bean, took his hand for a moment, and then headed for the door. Wait, said Bean. Where are you going? Tactical? Navigational? Support? Command school, Ender answered. Pre-command? Command, said Ender. And then he was out the door. Anderson followed him closely. Bean grabbed Colonel Graff by the sleeve. Nobody goes to command school until they're 16. Graff shook off Bean's hand and left, closing the door behind him. Bean stood alone in the room, trying to grasp what this might mean. Nobody went to command school without 3 years of pre-command in either tactical or support. But then nobody left battle school without at least 6 years, and Ender had had only 4. The system is breaking up, no doubt about it. Either somebody at the top is going crazy, or something's gone wrong with the war. The real war. The bugger war. Why else would they break down the training system like this? Wreck the game the way they did? Why else would they put a little kid like me in command of an army? Bean wondered about it as he walked back down the corridor to his own bed. The lights went out just as he reached his bunk. He undressed in the darkness, fumbling to put his clothes in a locker he couldn't see. He felt terrible. At first he thought he felt bad because he was afraid of leading an army, but it wasn't true. He knew he'd make a good commander. He felt himself wanting to cry. He hadn't cried since the first few days of homesickness after he got here. He tried to put a name on the feeling that put a lump in his throat and made him sob silently. However much he tried to hold it down. He bit down on his hand to stop the feeling, to replace it with pain. It didn't help. He would never see Ender again. Once he named that feeling, he could control it. He lay back and forced himself to go through the relaxing routine until he didn't feel like crying anymore. Then he drifted off to sleep. His hand was near his mouth. It lay on his pillow hesitantly, as if Bean couldn't decide whether to bite his nails or suck on his fingertips. His forehead was creased and furrowed. His breathing was quick and light. He was a soldier, and if anyone had asked him what he wanted to be when he grew up, he wouldn't have known what they meant.